She once said, "You shouldn't be waiting for the police to bang on your door. If you did it, then you shouldn't be doing your job." The Right Honourable Landlady should forget her tax advice and follow her own advice.
Mr. Speaker, I know the party opposite is desperate to talk about my living arrangements, but the public want to know what this government is going to do about theirs. Natalie from Brighton has been served with 2 no-fault eviction notices in 18 months. She joins nearly 1 million families at risk of homelessness due to his party's failure to ban this cruel practice. Now, instead of obsessing over my house, when will he get a grip and show the same obsession with ending no-fault evictions?
Well, to begin with, it is a pleasure to have another exchange with the Right Honourable Lady in this House, our 5th in 12 months. Any more of these, and she'll be claiming it as her principal residence.
Failed mortgage holders. But, Mr. Speaker,
Angela Rayner was left humiliated in Parliament as MPs erupted in laughter during a heated exchange as she stood at the dispatch box defending what critics call Labour's biggest election scandal. She tried to control the narrative but faced immediate backlash the moment she spoke. The room turned against her as MPs heckled and her own party stayed silent. Angela Rayner, known for her tough stance, cracked under pressure. This isn't just a bad day for her, it's a political disaster for Labour now. The real question is whether Labour can survive it.
Thank the Deputy Prime Minister for her statement and advance sight of it. Although supportive of the principle of devolving power to local areas, we are totally against her plans to abolish every county council and every district council in England, and the unprecedented mass postponement of local elections for at least 1 year. Today is a very worrying day for democracy in this country. She is making local government less accountable to the people and more accountable to her. Contrary to the Deputy Prime Minister's statement, she is not doing away with a 2-tier system. She is simply creating a new tier of Orwellian-sounding strategic authorities, which are closer to her and closer to Whitehall. And these are for her to use as a pawn to implement this government's deeply unpopular socialist agenda.
Rayner entered Parliament with confidence, having faced tough debates before, but today was different. This was about power control and public trust. Labour's decision to delay local elections in 9 major regions, including East Sussex, West Sussex, Essex, Norfolk, and Suffolk, left 5.5 million voters without a say. Their justification, a once-in-a-generation reform to shift power from Westminster to local government.
The reality is that this is delegation, not devolution, but a clear centralisation. As Dr. Andy Mycock of Leeds University sets out in his recent paper on her plans, there are clear concerns about the potential power drain of backbench local councillors if local government is seen increasingly as a delivery agent. Let us be clear, this announcement is a huge upheaval of local government right across the country, but this was not a government manifesto commitment, and she has no mandate for it. These are her choices, and she has put a gun to the head of local councils to force them into a decision with little regard for local people.
Nobody bought it. The backlash was immediate. Conservative MPs accused Labour of rigging the system, while Nigel Farage and Reform UK called it election interference. Even the Liberal Democrats condemned it as an attack on democracy. She stood at the dispatch box, ready to defend Labour's decision. But the moment she spoke, the mood shifted. It started with quiet chuckles from Tory MPs as she stumbled. The laughter grew. Some shouted, "You mean silencing voters," while others openly mocked her as she struggled to regain control.
It's not the invitation she claims in her statement, it is an instruction. No council should be bullied or blackmailed into local government restructuring. Local government should be local to residents and respect local identities. We have a proud record of supporting devolution, where we worked with local people and delivered devolution from the ground up rather than this top-down approach. The government tried to claim that they were taking a bottom-up approach. Indeed, the Minister for Local Government said exactly that on the floor of this House on the 20th of January. Yet, in her very statement, she admits that all two-tier areas should be making plans to move to simpler structures. Whitehall diktats imposed on local people rather than the locally led approach we followed, which are prone to problems, especially when rushed. So the questions I have for the Deputy Prime Minister: how exactly does it put more money in people's pockets, as she claims? What evidence has she got that will mean lower bills for taxpayers? How is this consistent with the Prime Minister's claims in March of 2023 that council tax would not increase by a single penny when they were in government? Does she accept that she has no electoral mandate for this huge upheaval? Does she also accept that these changes, which will mean every single council employee in two-tier areas reapplying for their jobs, will impact on local services, including planning delays? And how will this impact on her plans to deliver 1.5 million homes in this Parliament, a 50% increase from the 50-year record levels delivered by the previous government? Councils in some areas of the country, including in this announcement, are carrying very high levels of debt, Woking and Thurrock to name but two. What support will she be giving to authorities faced with eye-watering levels of debt? And will this debt be written off? What is she doing to ensure that as a result of today's announcement, that authorities do not embark on reckless asset disposal programmes and spending sprees? And can she confirm that elections will be delayed for a maximum of a year? Or is it the case, as we have heard, that elections could be delayed by up to 3 years?
The Speaker intervened multiple times to restore order, but it was too late. Rayner had lost the room. Her face tensed, her voice wavered. She tried to push through, but the humiliation was clear. Then, in a moment of public embarrassment, she was caught, holding back tears for a politician known for being tough and unshakable. This was a total collapse. It was obvious this wasn't just a misstep, it was a disaster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I've been very clear that Labour is embarking on a once-in-a-generation project to unlock growth in our regions and shift power out of Westminster and into local communities. I'm not quite sure where the benches opposite are. I can't quite figure out whether the Conservatives agree with it or whether they don't agree with it by that response, Madam Deputy Speaker. But what I will say in response to the Right Honourable Gentleman's questions was, first of all, it will unlock billions of pounds of money so that we can spend on frontline services. And that's why councils have come forward and want to work with us to ensure that we deliver. And all local government reform applications to the priority programme and all applications to the statutory invitation for all two-tier areas will be for local areas to decide and apply. But we've made no bones about the fact that we want to see reorganisation, so money and funding goes into public services where they need it the most. Secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, he talked about money. We've put £69 billion, a real 6.8% cash terms increase into local authorities. In contrast, Madam Deputy Speaker, 23% cut in the last decade under the Conservatives. So when he talks about council debt, it's his government that has pushed councils to the brink. And he talked about impact on local services. We are working with councils to inject the money and resources so that they can deliver for local people. It's his government that brought them to the brink. He talked about housing targets. I can't believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, he wants to talk about housing targets because his government failed to meet their housing targets every single year and has left us with a housing crisis. The former minister should be apologising for his government's record on housing.
As Angela Rayner struggled under pressure, Kay was nowhere to be found. The leader who promised stability and professionalism was absent when his deputy needed him most. For many in Labour, this was proof that the cracks at the top were too big to ignore. Rayner was left to handle the crisis alone, defending a scandal that many believe wasn't even her decision. But why was she taking all the heat while Starmer stayed in the shadows? Labour insiders say this isn't new. Starmer often steps back when controversy hits, letting others take the fall, but this time the stakes were too high behind the scenes. Senior Labour figures were furious not just at the Tories, but at Starmer himself. Some MPs confronted his team, demanding he take control. Others saw it as another sign of his failing leadership at a critical moment.
The Prime Minister has set out today that he wanted a high-skill, high-wage economy. He has also been on the record as saying that the tactic of fire and rehire is unacceptable. Surely the best way of ensuring that we have a high-wage economy is to work with the Private Members' Bill to make sure that we do end that tactic of fire and rehire.
Mr. Speaker, the most vivid example of fire and rehire is that conducted by the Labour Party. If I recall, the leader of the Labour Party himself fired his deputy leader and then rehired her as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Mr. Speaker, and Shadow Secretary of State for the Future of Work. Mr. Speaker, the future of work under Labour is low wages, low skills, driven by uncontrolled immigration. The people of this country have had enough of that. What they want to see is high wages, high skills, controlled immigration, and that's what this government is committed to deliver.
But instead of backing Rayner Starmer's team, distanced themselves. Leaked conversations suggest his closest allies are now questioning her future as deputy leader. Some see her as a liability, too divisive and unpredictable for a top role in government. And it gets worse. Reports suggest some Labour insiders are already discussing replacing Rayner before the next election. A devastating betrayal, if true.
We get to in our country where the government, frame it in whatever way they want. Say, in certain areas we're going to postpone this local election. That is absolutely appalling. A fully functioning democracy means it has to be fully functioning, and that's elections when they're set, regardless of the circumstances, unless it's an absolute national emergency. Yeah. But the only emergency here is for Labour, because they think they're going to lose loads of their councillors.
Yeah, they're going to get embarrassed, they're humiliated, they know that, so their technique is to get rid of these elections. So all 21 county councils in England are currently up for election on May the 1st, and there's 10 larger authorities as well will take place in those elections. Now, this is what local government Minister Jim McMahon said. Listen to this.